So would you like to start my presentation by reading a sentence, which is to me perfectly in line with several words from the welcome and the introductory messages of my Italian colleagues and friends. It's time to introduce what might be called digital humanism, in which archaeologists, anthropologists, architects, historians, philosophers, lawyers, neuroscientists, and psychologists work side by side with chemists, physicists, and computer scientists to define a new semantics for the understanding the complexity of reality. This sentence was spoken during the opening ceremony of the first G20 Cultural Ministers meeting in Rome, the last July 29. And I think this is an excellent way to start explaining the deeper aim of our project on Notre-Dame. Heritage science is an umbrella term that encompasses all forms of scientific research and now also reflects the scope of research in academia, but also in cultural institutions around the conservation, the interpretation, the management of cultural heritage. Given the breadth of range of the disciplines involved, this is a field where the production of knowledge is fully recognizable as a social construct. This is also an area where the role of technology is very important in conducting scientific research and experiments that contribute to the history of heritage artifacts, the identification of the materials, the techniques used by their creators, the understanding of the weathering phenomena that affect them, but also the design of dissemination devices to explain them to the audience. So the multi, the inter, and the transdisciplinary nature of this research make it particularly conducive to transversal approaches that cross several heritage fields, such as archives and libraries, archaeology and historical monuments, tangible and intangible heritage, and so on. And I think that it opened up new topics, whether in digital humanities, in material science, and anthropology of heritage. So the place of digital data is essential to building a new semantics for understanding the complexity of reality, especially because in this field, the complexity does not concern only the physical dimension of material objects, but also, above all, the mechanism of knowledge production that give them their identity and value as an heritage. So we say that research can only be understood through its practices, through the observation of science and technology in action. The confrontation between real object and multidisciplinary study is a privileged framework for observing the collective analysis and the interpretation of facts, objects, and phenomena that bring together the production of data, but also the production of knowledge in this area. So how can this memory be documented, structured, made accessible so that it can meet the needs of a variety of users in the short term, I mean, in the context of the study of an object, but also in the long term, towards the construction of what we can call a knowledge based on heritage science? To answer these questions, our project presents ongoing, but also an operative approach to the production, the analysis, and the intersection of data in collaborative studies. And as you know, benefits from what we can consider as an exceptional experimental framework, capable of providing what one can consider as a portrait of scholarly practices in heritage science into the digital age. So the fire that devastated Notre-Dame on April 15, 2019 turned a new page on its history. Certainly painful, but also a privileged moment for the observation and the study of a monument that is today really a site of global cross-disciplinary diachronic and heuristic studies. This is an asset because we can access to materials and technical details never seen before. And of course, because technological maturity, especially concerning the digital sphere, allow us today to work on a particular past, present, future dialectic. But of course, it's also a big challenge consisting in recovering of knowledge about the architectural elements and materials before the fire, extracting and saving the scientific information contained in the preserved materials, introducing physico-chemical processes to understand the evolution of climate through the materials, coupling modeling systems for the geometric, the structural, and the acoustic studies, and finally capturing and analyzing a common heritage that arouses emotions in society. So the link between these assets and these challenges is at the heart of the National Scientific Action Notre-Dame, which is coordinated by the CNRS and the Ministry of Culture. And as Larry already said, it comprises 175 registered researchers today, coming from 50 research units organized around 8 working groups. So working groups of materials such as wood, metal, stone, glass, on behaviors, so structural and acoustic behaviors, but also on more sociological and anthropological aspects, such the heritage emotions. And the digital data, of which I'm the coordinator, is probably the cross-cutting working group acting on this project. So all these challenges revolve around a central theme. To grasp all these disciplines, themes, working methods, which tackle the same object of study in a global and transversal analysis. To me, and I believe to my colleagues too, this is an unprecedented opportunity for studying the way in which each discipline, coming from its own territory, is confronted with the test that crosses all the disciplines. So, what do we really know about what distinguishes the way an architect, an archaeologist, or a chemist looks at the same object? How do we know what links them? And how can we know where differences in vocabulary denote the same realities? And we discussed about these topics during the PhD preparation of Valeria Cera. And this is for highlighting how this the organization of this event is relevant to me. So by this project, we would like to show that first, computational modeling and digitization are key, not only for helping the restoration of Notre-Dame, but to building the new field of study of heritage science. Then the data generated is n-dimensional. I mean, dealing with features that express the complexity of materials, forms, spaces, behaviors, and its structuring will enable novel mechanisms of synergy between disciplines. Finally, its analysis will highlight the mechanisms of knowledge production specific to each discipline, each research group, and each individual involved in the study of this great historical artifact. So I believe that in the long term, this project aims to build a new field of study, a territory of multidisciplinary and multidimensional digital data as a raw material for the study of the mechanisms of knowledge production in the field of cultural heritage. And this research track integrates the definition of an approach, of course, but also replicable working methodology and open and reusable digital ecosystem to build multidisciplinary knowledge cathedrals around the collaborative research on heritage objects. Conceived as a framework for experimenting with the construction of a distributed, adaptable, and open socio-technical system inspired by the concept of ecosystem-oriented architecture, within this project, we will try to shift the cursor of the digitization from the physical features of an heritage object to the knowledge mobilized to its understanding. In this sense, we are trying to introduce an innovative mechanism that merges an evolving digital representation of the cathedral, like its digital twin, with the representation of the knowledge built around it, like the approaches developed for the geographies of scientific knowledge. Our aim to analyze the interdependencies between the spatial, the temporal, the morphological features of an heritage object and the related knowledge objects built by scholars through their research practices. Our long-term aim is to map and to explore the way in which multiple documentation and analytical processes are distributed spatially, temporally, and semantically within a multidisciplinary study. As with deep mapping, the aim will be to relate data, observation, and analysis protocols with the interpretation and the categorization of multiple facets of the same material object by exploring a territory of digital resources that intrinsically reflects the complex interactions between physical objects and systems of actors, as well as their relationships and structures. With the dual aim of memorizing and analyzing the plurality of perspectives on the same objects, the cathedral, we are fusing methods in conceptual modeling with different branches of digital humanities, computer science, for the development of what we can consider as a collective knowledge system. A digital ecosystem to unlock a value layer that is both rich in human participation and driven by well-structured information. Our work approach is based on the interlocking of scientific, methodological, and technological aspects at the same time. The main components of our approach form the acronym NDAM. ND stands for N-dimensional. On the scientific level, this project tried to introduce novel mechanisms of n-dimensional data correlation to collectively produce, structure, and analyze masses of heterogeneous data around the four key aspects. First, the space, through the 3D spatialization of digital resources produced daily at the project and the object of study on site. Second, the form, from the annotation, the classification, and the recognition of relevant features and the curation of the concepts that denote them within terminological or ontological structures. Third, time, through the monitoring of instrumental but also cognitive activities carried on object of study and data, as well as on the diachronic analysis of forms and spaces. And finally, knowledge domain, through the analysis of thematic overlaps resulting from the multiple disciplinary views focusing on common regions of interest. A and M stands for analysis and memorization. Because from a methodological point of view, this project addresses the analysis and the memorization of the scientific activities carried on a multidisciplinary object of study by highlighting the path different actors follow on producing, using, and connecting digital data with respect to their objects of study. It's a matter of understanding the nature of the mobilized knowledge, their specificity with regard to each disciplinary field, as well as their conceptual and operational relationships with spatial, temporal, and morphological features of the studied object. And for this, as you can see in the next presentations today, we are introducing solutions for the production of on-site and in-lab ready-to-enrich data, the spatial and the temporal distribution of data streams, the multi-layer semantic annotation, and finally, the tracking of the path from raw data to multidisciplinary knowledge. Finally, E stands for ecosystem. The technological dimension of the project is expressed by the development of a digital ecosystem, like an open socio-technical system, including a collaborative toolkit for human-driven collection, categorization, and annotation of digital assets for experimenting massive data correlation, but the prototyping of an ongoing development of an autonomous engine in charge of the continuous amplification and cross-fertilization of the data corpus. The first modules of these digital environments are integrated into the CNRS very large facility Humanism and are available to all members of the Notre-Dame Scientific Action and also all the actors of the restoration site from the beginning of 2021. And the platform provides today more than 100 registered users with dedicated web services for the managing of deposits, the indexing of multimedia content, the structuring of thesauri, the visualization of 3D digitization of the remains, the annotation of 2D and 3D representation with semantic tags, and finally the analysis of 4D datasets merging past, present, and future states of the material. And these pieces of software come from a federated effort of many laboratories involved in the project, and you can see the logo in the list on the right. So the unique opportunity to collectively produce and analyze masses of digital data on an emblematic heritage science object like Notre-Dame can only be achieved by transforming the opportunity specific to this working group on digital data, into a collective opportunity to foster the renewal of working protocols aimed at introducing the next generation of tools and methods for the heritage science community. This will be the heritage of the Notre-Dame scientific project, to my opinion. As a logical extension of this last point, our methodology is based on the intersection of two axes of scientific activities. And this intersection reveals the profound cross-disciplinary nature of the project. The first axis ranges from the knowledge formalization to the IT implementation of data analysis and correlation mechanisms. The second axis addresses ways to daily produce and analyze next generation of semantically enriched data. And this methodology is today using two main case studies that you will see in the next presentation in interaction, a strong interaction with all the thematic groups acting into the scientific project. First, the forest, the timber roof, which implicates researchers interested in materials such as wood, metal, the construction techniques, the chronologies, and mechanics. And then the collapsed vaults, which combine research on materials like stone, metal, archaeology, interested in constructive details, lapidary signs, architecture, focusing on composition and geometry, and the structural behavior too. And this aspect is also in interaction with some intangible aspects like acoustics and heritage emotions. In conclusion, I think that by taking advantage of this unique opportunity to digitally accompany the production of an emblematic data corpus while collaborating with the entire scientific group involved into the Notre-Dame action, we believe that our project could bring important advances to the wider heritage science community. First, this project will bring together and preserve the digital expression of a collective adventure with implications for the digital transition in heritage science, as well as a profound understanding of the relationships that connect each actor, each research group or disciplinary field to the multiple facets that make up the complexity of an heritage artifact. Second, This repository of interconnected data and knowledge can stimulate a world-class dynamic in terms of producing and sharing structured resources representing all the disciplines, looking at a unique object. And this contains an heritage perspective to me. Third, this project will sow seeds for future applications to many other heritage objects by stimulating the adoption of cumulative approaches, by introducing frameworks for large-scale comparative analysis of heritage-related research objects, and putting, to my opinion, the digital data in a central role for renewing collaborative approaches in multidisciplinary scientific areas. And finally, from a data analysis perspective, this project opens the door for broader studies on the complex relationships that scholars associate with their object of study. This correlated data exploration mechanism could also address the identification of new contexts for the social construction of research communities, including ways to build social networks around the spontaneous association of expertise and interest, also involving non-academic areas. Thank you very much.